Marilynn
We want
Hughes.
Brian
What the?
Malum.
Me. How you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you, Brian?
Fantastic. What do you say, since we're together here talking on Zoom, that we go ahead and do a podcast?
Let's do it.
You
I think
wanna?
that's a good idea. I think we
Well,
should do it.
I thought we're already talking, so why not go ahead and do a podcast? I don't know about the name of this one: Angels, Demons, and the Discrimination Process.
Okay. All right.
Well, I don't know.
We're just I guess we're gonna go that way. That's where we're going.
Let's do it.
We're traveling now. We are now traveling through the speed of thought and sound and light and the particulate matter and, all those things.
I was going to add particulate matter, but then you took the words right out of my mouth. So today we're going to continue our deep dive into the three major paths or grand phases of the soul, which do happen to coincide with several monastic traditions, and you wrote about in the Mysteries of the Redemption.
Yes, we certainly did.
In our last podcast, we covered the 8 phases of the first path, the ascension pathway, purification. And then today we'll be continuing with the alteration pathway.
Okay.
Discrimination. But first, this is what I texted you that you didn't see the text.
Okay.
I'd like to talk a little bit about angels and demons in the battle for souls, which of course is very connected with the discrimination process. And I'd like to start with a question that I asked you last Saturday. Who are the big dogs of evil in the spirit?
The big dogs.
The big dogs of evil in the spirit world that are behind the major vices and the ways that they bring our souls down. And who are the angels or the virtues that help us to overcome these big dogs of evil trying to take us down within this spiritual warfare that we're involved in?
Well, there's a lot of them, but we'll cover a few. There's Leviathan, who covers a lot of the pride issues that we have. There's Baal, who has a lot to do with corruption of the soul in a lot of different ways. It can be corruption regarding greed and lust, and so he can cover a lot of things. He's very versatile. We have Asmodeus, who is known for breaking up families, so he goes after destroying families. I have a book called Demonology, an overview, which gives you the entire list, and also another book called Angelology, which gives you the list of the different principalities and powers of the good. And on the angelic side, you have the archangels, and the big guy, Saint Michael, is the one that you are constantly calling for help from in spiritual warfare against these major demonic forces. There are demons of all calibers that are called in just by the very thoughts that we have give allowance to either demons of vice or angels of virtue to come towards us. So we magnetize the kinds of forces that come near us by our thoughts. So if we have greedy thoughts, lustful thoughts, we're going to be magnetizing some of these forces towards us. One of the ones that I saw was named Ashira. We were joking around about Bob, Betty, Sue, and and all those things. But there are some that do have names. One was the goddess of greed, and her name was Ashira. There's also the gull, which is a demon of. It's a demon of messed up sexual energy. So it's when I'm trying to remember the exact word for it, but I'm not remembering it right off the top of my head. But it's when you're falling for lower sexual energies, that type of thing. And it's the gull, and that is a measure above, what would be the succubuses and the incubuses, which are a lower level of the issues of lust and sexual demons. You have these powers, like Behemoth and things like this, who are just powers. When you think of those that contain the aspects, because they stand over the army of demons, so they actually contain aspects of the whole thing. When you think about Legion, you might think of some of these. They're just all corruption comes from them. On the other hand, on the angelic side, you have the angels of the virtues as well. And so you have the angels of the virtues, but you also have the archangels, who are the ones who actually go to battle more. These are more the principalities that are involved in the actual warfare. The angels of the virtues are actually more involved in the cultivation that we engage in. And then, of course, there's all these different orders of the angelic that work in the purification and the discrimination process and discipline of the soul as it reaches towards a higher construct. So you have all of these elements that are working around us at all the time. So it's very important for us to become aware of the types of thoughts that we are projecting outwards, because we are giving permission as we think these things or do these things. Because a lot of people will ask, well, what do you do to prevent that from happening? Part of the way that you start preventing that sort of thing is that you become able to discriminate between the way that you think, because you want to stop giving permission to lower level entities to come near you.
Okay. So my question is, I pray to God, but can we pray to specific angels as opposed, or should we just go straight to God?
Well, praying to God is something that is always you should always pray to God. But, even St. Padre Pio told his spiritual children that, we should pray to our guardian angel, because our guardian angel is always waiting to help us at our side. And everyone has a guardian angel, and that we should always be aware of praying to our guardian angel to help us in things that are going on around us. One thing I don't remember whether or not I mentioned in our last podcast was a Reverend John McGowan, one of the forgotten mystics I included in my book called Forgotten Mystics, was was a 17th century Protestant minister who was a mystic, and his gift was very unique in that he was allowed to go into this gateway to hell and listen to the demons as they spoke about the way that they were going to ensnare humankind. And the book that he wrote is called The Dialogues with the Devils, or The Dialogues of the Devils. I'm not sure which, but it's a really fascinating read, because it shows you the ways that we are subtly worked on through the schemes that are brought up in these demonic realms. He would hear things about things as simple as changing a fashion, so that immodesty would start emerging. It would be very subtle changes that would just start changing the way people think, and it would be easier and easier and easier to literally win this battle for souls, because the thing with the demonic is, you don't have to do something really obvious. You do something very subtle. And this is why people are so often, misled by it, because they're like, well, that's not that big of a deal. Most of that's okay. I mean, that's just a small thing, you know? So then you have the small thing, and then another small thing is introduced, and it continues. And then you see how that catapults onto itself, and then eventually you have big problems, and you have immorality running rampant. You have people who have no idea um, what the difference between what the difference between a purposeful um, action might be versus a completely pointless action that is just causing destruction. And we see that all around us right now. And I'm sure, this is something we see regularly in the human condition. And I highly recommend that read, The Dialogues with the Devils, because it's going to show people how this is very subtly done. It's very similar, actually, to C.S. Lewis's Screw Tape Letters, but his was actually fictionally created from his, imagination, which was very well done. But it's interesting that Reverend McGowan had this experience. There's a very powerful section in there about the crucifixion and how the demonic realms experienced the crucifixion of Christ, and how and when they knew who he was. And it's something that you have to read to really get. This is really powerful.
And what does Emmanuel Swedenberg have to say about this?
Oh, well, Emmanuel Swedenborg wrote a lot of books, but one of his, seminal classics was Heaven and Hell. And his experiences were very similar to mine in that, and to a lot of mystics, but our experiences were very similar in the sense that when you cross over, you go where you're compatible. And that what you are, here in the earthly realm, we can appear one way on the outside and be another on the inside. So we can be interiorly, rotting flesh and look like we're wonderful on the outside. We can also look horrible on the outside and be, a total mess, and on the inside we have a soul of gold. You know what I mean? And it can be in any number of manifestations. The only way you really know is when it is revealed to you through the energetic truth, which is only given as a mystical gift to us, which tells us what's really going on. In the mystical realms, you see what things are as they are. There are no more masks. So Emmanuel Swedenborg talked a lot about how when people cross over, they become what they truly are. They go towards their true loves and lusts. So those who love God and love the things of divine love and wisdom will naturally amend to the angelic spaces, where those who are caught up in carnal, grounded, worldly things, they will, you will see them immediately as like the succubi and the incubi, or the gulls. And those who are into the avarice or the greed will become the demonic form that correlates with that interior disposition. So we become immediately what we really are. And for the most of us will be somewhere in between, and that's where the purgatories come in. Now, Emmanuel Swedenborg did not talk, I don't know that he talked about purgatory. I don't think I've ever seen him. He was his book was primarily about heaven and hell. But in the Catholic tradition and in the experiences that I've had, there is a great deal of activity in the purgatorial realms, which is where people are still afterlife working this purification process after their death, because they're still trying to purify of defects, and they want to continue to move forward towards God. And this, of course, is the eternal journey. This is what we're all trying to do as we kind of muddle through life, but also as we muddle after life. It's a continual journey into knowledge and the greater understanding, and moving closer and closer to God, who is our final end. He is our greatest and final end. And so when you in Swedenborg's writings, it's very much focused on how we become what we are interiorly. He doesn't talk a lot about like the powers and principalities. In Swedenborg's writings, his experience was that most of the angels in heaven and the demons in hell were originally people on earth. And so these are the results of people and their lives and this evolutionary process, whether people actually went through purification or went the other direction. In my experience, there is a lot of that, but there is also there are also principalities and powers, and there are different orders. So like, for instance, like an archangel is a completely different order of being, a different order of creature than what an angel that might have once long ago been a human being might be. There are many different angelic hierarchies that are specifically a different order of creation. And so that's different. And then there are certain types of, demonic levels of, the demonic principalities that you would say the same. But we do, what we are drawn to, what we love is what we become. And I think this is hard for people, but this is really the basis of your purification, and it becomes the basis of your discrimination journey, which is, okay, so what I really love, and this is where true humble honesty comes in through this part of your journey. What I truly love is what I am. That's really what I am and what I will become. And so therefore you have to be profoundly self-scrutinizing. There's a lot of self-scrutiny in there. But it's a journey that is taken in a lot of stages to help you through it, so that you can have these things revealed to you in a gradual way, so that you're not overwhelmed, because we would all be overwhelmed if we really just understood, all of it in one fell swoop. You know what I mean? And so, God is merciful, and that is his greatest attribute. And so he reveals these aspects to us in these degrees in the discrimination process, so that we can take them on one piece at a time, and another piece at a time. And this is how we gradually, going again back to one of my favorite little quotes to quote, is the Taoist quote about, virtue is not attained in one fell swoop. It's attained by, like a pitcher. A pitcher can become a full pitcher of water if the drops just keep dropping in a consistent manner. Eventually it becomes a full pitcher of water. But similarly, and this is the same Taoist saying, similarly, the same drops, if they are the drops of darkness, you can fill that pitcher with a different kind of water, which would be the dark stuff. So, we fill our souls with the drops that we feed it consistently, day in, day out, day in, day out, day in, day out. And if we are filling it with something that is bringing more light in, we are going to transform. But if we unknowingly or knowingly continue to throw more things into it that are going to turn us backwards or more into the darker path, we are going to find ourselves more dominated by that darkness before we realize what's happened.
So I have a quote from Spiritual Warfare, Angels and Demons, that I
Yes.
listened to a couple days ago because, I like your audiobooks. So the destiny of humanity is to enter timelessness and leave time behind, to cross the bridge with the knowledge of forever intact. And so you found yourself in this place, and there was this demon who wanted to take you down and not let you take forever over the bridge, because he was told by the darkness that if he did that, he would get his daughter back. But you knew that following a lie from the darkness would only bring his soul deeper into the abyss, and that a soul cannot serve darkness in order to be freed from it.
Right.
So as far as free will goes in the battle for souls, and there's all these dark energies, demons, how is it even fair when we're being lied to and the road to hell is literally paved with deceit?
Well, it is paved with deceit, but it's really not about fairness. It's more about, it is a good question because, and I kind of, it makes me think about, because there are so many people that I have seen throughout my life who have legitimately and very honestly fallen off, away from the path of the light, and truly honestly believe that they did not. you know and so what it is, it we listen to the things that make us feel good. We listen to the things that we want to hear. The real work of the purification process is that we are reforming our conscience. And so when we come into the discrimination process, what the real work here is that we have to take this newly formed conscience and actually apply it to our lives in a painful way. Mother Teresa would say, we have to love until it hurts. And I don't think people really understand that unless they really just take a moment, maybe a lot of moments, to think about what does that mean. Because let's think about what she's saying. Because let's look at her life, for one. Mother Teresa loved until it hurt. How many people view love as something that is only meant to feed them, to fill them? But Mother Teresa understood that God had asked her to love in a self-emptying manner, so that everything that her life became she became a funnel where God's love moved, and it was moving towards everyone else. And it hurt. This is what we learned when her letters came out and she had this darkness in her life. She loved until it really hurt because she had to self-sacrifice to do that. She was not doing this because it made her feel good or full. She did it and it was hard. And discrimination is hard because it asks difficult things of us. And this is where a lot of people fall away. They don't want to do the difficult work, which requires us to make changes in our lives, to make decisions that we don't want to make, to change the way we view things, and therefore then change the way we do things to make right the things we have done wrong. When I went through the discrimination pathway, I would receive instructions about sending letters to people that I had harmed 20 years ago, apology letters, explaining to them my new insight into what I had done to harm them. And I had to do a lot of things that were uncomfortable. They were very uncomfortable. And then I had to make new kinds of decisions that changed the way my life was going, that made my life more difficult. God asked things of me, like, for instance, give everything away for free. And you're just going to have to trust me. You know what I mean? So he asks you, just as, Mother Teresa was given that too. Mother Angelica, who founded the Eternal Word television network, had to trust that, okay, you're just going to do that. You're going to build that television tower and you're going to trust that somehow the financial means to do it is going to show up. So there's a lot of trust you're putting into doing what God is asking of you. And it's hard, and you have to work hard. You're asked to work even harder because, again, we go back to the whole directive I talk about, which is we are always asked to give back to creation that which creation gives to us. And we can't forget that, because there is nothing unjust about being asked to give everything away for free. If God asks it, it is because I have received so much more. And if he asks it, it's because he will make it possible for me to do that. And so he might ask me to work other jobs and also maintain this at the same time. But these will be things that are difficult that I deal with, and I've done in order to make these things happen. But it's also in the discrimination process. It's just the excruciating self-examination, because you are literally going through that life review that we often wait till the end of our lives for. But the benefit of doing it now is that you are correcting the path. And so you're correcting the misviews, the things that you haven't seen, your incorrect perceptions about life versus death, versus what is good versus what is evil, versus what is life-giving, what's more life-taking. And all these things reform you. And by reforming you, it literally changes your entire destiny, alters the direction your life is taking, and everything, is going to change. So it's very exhausting, takes a lot of work. People around you may not understand. You may have to accept losing people who can't travel it with you, who can't understand it, who just don't support it. So the 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 pathway is not an easy one, and that's why Mother Teresa said, "Love until it hurts." It's and we look at just think about that, about how our society views love. And we look at it in a very self-fulfilling way. We want it to make us feel good. We don't think about love as sacrifice, love as self-giving. And ironically, a lot of these concepts go back to what Pope John Paul II taught in the Theology of the Body. So those who want to actually, think about that more, you can read Pope John Paul II's writings on the theology of the body, which has more to do with how love was intended and how we are to serve one another. And it is not intended to just be self-gratification. So we have a lot of ideas about our lives that are self-serving. And when we have to re-examine them, then we have to change what we're doing. It's hard to do.
It seems to me, of course, we come here in a degree of darkness, almost in a trance. I see people walking around like they're in a spell, me included sometimes, right, for sure. And you mentioned to me that this is not our realm. Right? This realm doesn't really belong to, it's not a heavenly realm.
No, it's not.
It's a purgatorial realm. It belongs, who does it belong to?
Well, God gave dominion of the earth to Lucifer. It was given to Lucifer. It's his dominion. And so, even going back to your original question, it's his dominion. That's why people are going to hear those whispers in their ears, because it's kind of, we're trying to actually move beyond the kind of world that is actually primarily ruled by darkness, but we still are in one that it has a lot there. This is not a place where the light reigns here yet. It's a mortal realm. It's the nature of it. That's the way it operates. That's the way it functions. And if we want to actually gain the benefit of being here, we want to overcome those darknesses that are still within us and be able to throw them off and move more where we bring more light into ourselves.
And so it's kind of, to me, a tough love. For it's a grand chance for our soul to really grow.
Yes.
In a big way by being here, because we're being tested so much. When we get into the discipline pathway on our next podcast, then we're really going to get into that.
Yeah. Because
it forces us in a darker realm where it's more dense to really get more disciplined with our spirituality.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
I want to talk a little bit more before we jump into the alteration pathway, discrimination. Even though we've been in the discrimination process this whole conversation, but we haven't jumped into the three major phases of the discrimination process yet. I just wanted to ask, okay, so we're in this darker realm, we're chilling out, we're hanging, we're being influenced, interdimensionally. There's a lot of darkness kind of coming in,
but you have to keep in mind too, there are a lot of light sources that are also coming in, and we do choose which ones we listen to.
And so with angels and demons, since that's
excuse me,
since that's okay, I'll forgive you.
Thank you.
Since it's in the title of our talk, angels and demons, I used to pray to Archangel Michael. I say, Archangel Michael, please fill me with your golden white light, penetratable only by love. Or fill my space with your golden white light, penetratable only by love. Or fill my wife or my son with your golden white light, penetratable only by love. I still use that. But do we even need to know who the angels are? Or the devils are, the demons? Does it even matter that we know who they are? Or is it just like that's the gull. Watch out for him. You know what he does? I'll tell you what do we even need to, it's just dark and light, and we need to stay with the light and be discriminatory if something pops up. Or maybe, it's going to be something specific in particular, and there's a certain darkness that's behind that one, but it doesn't even matter. Because aren't we, if I pray to God, God's going to go, oh, you need Raphael. Bing, there you go. Instead of me going like, oh, I better choose which, quick, I better look this up. Yeah, Raphael.
Well, it's helpful to know, for instance, like if you're dealing with spiritual warfare, you definitely want to call on Saint Michael. And of course, you want to call on the power of Jesus Christ and the blood of Christ and Christ crucified. One of the things I wrote about in my book was Christ crucified is just a statement. If you repeat it over and over to a demon, it makes their skin burn. So, there are things that are helpful to know. One of the things I definitely learned and is written about in the Mysteries of the Redemption as well is that many of the Catholic prayers are very powerful in the mystical realms, in the out-of-body travel state. So for instance, the Our Father, most especially the first stanza, the Apostles' Creed, the Hail Mary, the trying to think which ones specifically. Those are the biggies. There's others, I'm sure. But the St. Michael prayer is a really good one to use when you're dealing with spiritual warfare. But
what's the St. Michael prayer?
Saint Michael the Archangel, defend us in battle, be our defense against the wickedness and the snares of the devil. May God rebuke him, we humbly pray. Do thou, O Prince of the heavenly host, through the power of Almighty God, cast into hell Satan and all the evil spirits who prowl about the world seeking the ruin of souls. Amen. But there is also...
That's my new prayer.
There's also, a chaplet to St. Michael and a novena to St. Michael. And I utilize those. I got them. Some people have done some great things on YouTube. And, I download the audio, put them onto CDs. I guess a lot of people use MP3s, but you can use them in your prayer time if you like to do it that way. But of course, I have a lot of prayer books as well. So either way, whatever your particular mode is. But those are very powerful to call in St. Michael. St. Michael, I've written quite a bit about him. He, you don't see him often, but when you do, it is something you will not ever forget. I mean, he is huge. I mean, he is huge. I mean, I literally remember, holding on to the back of his shoulder. He's like a giant, like a real giant. I mean, I'm just like a little, it's like I'm like this big on his back, you know what I mean? Like the size of my finger holding on. And he's, literally has the power to break the neck of a demon with a single thought and cast them into hell. And he prowls about the world, and he is able to, any demon that is there without dominion, meaning that they are there because they were not invited. And they, and so that's one thing to keep in mind, the heavenly realm and the principalities of good, they patrol, but when we give permission for the entry of those demons into not only our world but our own perimeter, then there's certain eternal laws in place because of the nature of this realm, which is the battle between good and evil. So we give permission, then they can't just snap them up unless we're asking for help, so but St. Michael will go around the world and remove those who don't have permission to be here. So when you think about this and you think about all the other angelic forces who are doing these kinds of things, and you think about what I've talked about, which is that literally when you go over certain cities and literally the demonic presence is so strong, it's literally like you can't get through them, it's like a crowd of, like an anthill, it tells you what we are generating on earth, which is a very bad sign of our the psyche of humanity, and that we need to be praying a lot more. We need to be thinking a lot deeper and in a lot of different ways. Um, and and this is where the discrimination process comes in, because part of the difficulty is that so many souls do not realize that they are magnetizing demonic forces into their lives because they have not even examined their thoughts. They haven't examined their lives or their deeds. And this is the thing, well, that's not a big deal. Well, they don't really know because they haven't actually done any of the work. There's a mystical and ascetical theology is the science of the examination of the soul, the purification of the soul. And it's ironically, it's also this threefold process of purification, discrimination, and discipline. That's what mystical and ascetical theology are all about. That's why I recommend to people the reading of those mystical theology texts. And there are some at the website that you can actually download, like The Spiritual Life by Father Adolphe Tanqueray, and also The Three Ages of the Interior Life by Father Garrigou-Lagrange. And these are texts that go through this examine on the deeper levels with you. And ironically, even just beginning this process, starting this process of doing this physically is something that energizes it mystically. It creates that energy that moves people into having more out-of-body experiences wherein they are shown specificities about themselves. It's tough to get people open to realizing that this is a true need for all of us, not just people who are in the religious life. This is the work of our life. This is the work of our soul. We don't want to waste our time here. And part of the reason we see so much chaos and stuff around us is because people have given up these practices which help us to actually cultivate the soul. And that cultivation is pivotal and in the journey of a human soul in a mortal realm. And so we are seeing this, everything is thrown out of balance because people are not realizing they're missing the whole point of why they're here. And so,
the devil seems to assist us in some way. It's so this particular purgatorial third, fourth dimensional realm is taking the sword and putting it in the fire to make it sharper, stronger. And then also there's many realms just like the Earth realm, right? Different planets.
Yes,
mortal
planets, other mystical spheres. Yes, so many different types of ways that purgatories can exist.
And so there's going to be different levels. Like some of these realms are going to be higher vibration, some are going to be lower.
Yeah.
You mentioned that you had been in many mortal realms where they were completely overtaken by the dark.
Oh, yeah.
And that they were able to make progress and come back.
Yes.
To the light. So how did they do that?
It's usually because someone is sent, like such as myself or another spirit is sent to implant a truth. And if you have a receptive soul who receives that truth, then the light comes on, and the light can become, it's like planting seeds. It can spread. And so once that happens, and you know, when you're in those realms, you're going from whichever souls you are directed to assist. And then, so you go to the particular soul that, because God knows the heart of man. We don't. So you're taken and you don't know who you're going to go see. God knows, and he sends you to that person. Then sometimes there are others, and then you go and do that. You implant a truth, and if they receive it, then it can literally light them up. And once they light up, then they can start planting, and then you can start turning the realm. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yes. And so with that, I think it's a good time to segue into the discrimination process.
Sure.
And so just before we do, let's take a look real quick at the ascension pathway, the path of purification. If you could just quick give us a synopsis, going over the 8 phases of that, or, you know, it doesn't have to be like in this phase, but just what it's all about in a quick synopsis. You don't have to say like all the phases, but which you can do easily, but just say, you know, here's the purification process, here's what it's about, short speak, and then we're going to jump right into the discrimination pathway.
Okay. So, you know, when you start out with purification, you know, it's kind of like it begins with an awakening, you know, thus the, you know, prelude to a dream, you know, so you're awakening into the spiritual awareness. And that starts with a lot of things that you may or may not be aware of that are really important to your soul. So for instance, if you are you're going to remember certain past lives. You're going to be introduced to some basic concepts around like the oneness of life and the oneness of consciousness. You're going to experience the unconditional love of God. You're going to, of course, learn the basics of your spiritual body and all of those things. And you move in and you start moving towards learning more about your creative gifts. So, and this can be anything from creative gifts, like as a writer, an artist, musician, or like scientific gifts, analytical gifts, whatever your gifts are in this world. So you're going to go through a phase where you're being taught more about the gifts you were given to share with the world in this life that is often expressed professionally in your life. Then you're going to move into a phase where you're going to learn about lots of things. You're going to travel through different corridors. You're going to start learning about different realms. You're going to learn about the concept that's without surrender, you really can't progress. You have to let go. And in the letting go, you're allowing God to take your spirit up and take you to where you must be. And that's a hard process for a lot of people because we want to direct it. So learning to do that, surrendering so God can then take us to that next level. Then you're moving into the initiations into the mysteries, the rites of passage. And what happens there is all these, that's an amazing period, you know, where you're learning about ancient mysteries, a lot of things that have to do with energy and how the ancient mysteries from many different faiths, religions, and times, but it's also all about bringing together eventually the knowledge from all your past lives into one. And so you have this great initiation at the end where all that knowledge from all of your past lives comes into your one being along with your higher self. And your higher self is that part of you that is closest to God, so that you can bring that wisdom and all of those experiences into the present moment. Then you're moving into the next periods, which are the balancing of the masculine and the feminine energies. You're going to be energizing the eternal flame. If you're female, you may have to learn more about bringing in the masculine parts. And if you're male, you may have to learn more about bringing in the feminine parts. What you're going to find out about the eternal flame is that there's a lot related to it that has this psychedelic counterpart. So you're going to find out about how that which is eternal. You're going to see these elements, psychedelic eyes, psychedelic skies, psychedelic spirits. But this is all part of that eternal flame. And then you're going to go through another ritual passage into the rites of the ascension. And this is an interesting period too, because it's similar to the initiations and the mysteries, but you're actually going through a separate set of initiations, a little bit more intense in some ways, where you are going to reach the pinnacle of achieving the estate of ascension, which means that when you do die from this realm, you will not die in the sense that your personality has actually become conscious of your immortal self. So when you die, you won't die. When you die as an unawakened being, you really do die because that personality dies. So you don't, I hope this isn't sounding confusing. There's a death of that personality. The soul does not die. But so achieving the ascension is where literally you are having that clear continuity from life into death and death into life. But there's another reuniting that occurs, and this happens where you meet the souls in the out-of-body travel state of all the people that you loved and who were really important to you in all your lifetimes. And it's really awesome because you just all of a sudden you see them and you remember them. So, you know, all your mothers, all your fathers and brothers and sisters and people you loved and husbands and wives, you know, and children, you know, and you remember them and you're like, oh my God, how did I forget you? You know, and so you have this coming together again at the end of that stage. And, you know, in my case, I met with the angel of ascension who is, rather than the angel of death, who is like the skeleton face, skeleton body with the black robes, the angel of ascension has a face of light, hands of light, and wears a white robe. And the angel of ascension announces that you have attained to the ascension and that he will be the one who comes to get you when you leave this realm. And so that is when you finish up the initial rites of purification, and then you are entering into the discrimination pathway.
And so with the ascension pathway, then when we reach the ascension, we keep our consciousness.
Yes.
As opposed to, we didn't reach any level of awareness, and so there's no use for that consciousness. So the soul will continue on, but the consciousness that we had in that lifetime just didn't have any purpose. So
it did have, no, that's not exactly true. No,
okay.
It did have purpose, but it remains separated. You see, now remember how the importance of bringing all of those pieces into the one vessel? So they still have that importance, but the reason they have this importance is because their importance is vastly greater when that memory comes together as one, rather than you just have this little fragment that exists by itself, that by itself cannot really attain much spiritually because that it's not connected with all of this other experience or with the universal consciousness or the higher self from which it came. But by the very process of that initiation and bringing all these parts together, all of those fragments have now joined into the soul. So they're all there, you know, all those experiences, but it's a different thing once that happens and once the ascension happens, because the soul is going towards death into life consciously, whereas a soul who doesn't awaken during life experiences a different kind of death. It's not that they cease to exist, but that personality will cease, because the personality, the life that they lived was not connected to all of the other elements. Does that make sense? I'm not feeling like I'm getting it there.
Oh yeah.
So, okay, so yeah, when you don't, when we just are separated from all of life, it makes it mortal. So, does you see what I'm saying?
So
So
the
when we,
personality will stay.
the
And the,
personality will in a sense see, it will go through a death at the time of death, whereas someone who is awakened during life, um, it's not going to be the same thing, because the personality has no need to die. It's already been transformed. It's going to continue to evolve and transcend and go higher. It's a different kind of transition. People who have not awakened during life do not die either, but their personality will experience an ending. Does that make sense?
yeah, and then also at the same time, there's many different levels of awakenedness
Right.
and consciousness. So somebody might have awakened 1%
Right.
or 73%. And so that will move on because it's open to that eternal, continual learning and
Yes.
evolving
And one
and
thing I want to
growing.
add to that, just to make sure it's clear, because people can misunderstand this very easily. Um, you don't have to have been like a major out-of-body traveler or a mystic to achieve that. It helps. It's one way, but one of the things that I do is help people who are crossing over from life in their afterlife journeys. And I can tell you the prime objective has to do with this, all these things I'm talking about, with the mystical theology, this examination, the reformation of the consciousness. I've taken many souls who have gone to the highest immortal realms, who were very grounded individuals in their life. They were not mystical, they didn't read mystical texts, but they did self-formation. And so they did that. They were very aware of cultivating themselves. And so it's important to realize that this is not just something that can only occur if you're having lots of out-of-body experiences. I have taken souls to high immortal realms who were just very, very um, diligent in their self-study and their self-evaluation. They went through these processes, but they went through them in a different way, and they certainly probably would not have called it that while they were alive. Do you see? And so, God works in mysterious ways, so we don't want to limit that. We don't want to limit God, because he does it in his way. And we want to remember, it doesn't have to be just this way, but this is, out-of-body travel is an acceleration, because what it does is it gives us that direct experience where we experience the energetic truth about our own souls and about these things, and we're able to accelerate that because we are able to see things which under normal circumstances we might not see for a, that takes a lot longer for us to see or understand why it's not working for us. Whereas if you see the energetic truth, you feel it, you experience it, you are able to change it much more dramatically, much more quickly. There's a real solving factor that comes from the energetic experience of it.
Okay. Fantastic. Incredible.
But
That's
I want
amazing.
to say this too, like for instance, if you look at The Spiritual Life, written by Father Adolf Tanqueray, and that's like my favorite book ever written. But it's mystical, a treatise on a mystical and ascetical theology.
Oh, you know what?
It's
It just cut
important
out.
to,
The Wi-Fi just went out when you were doing the title. Of
oh,
course.
really? I'm going
To
to
say
say it again, by golly.
yes.
The Spiritual Life by Father Adolf Tanqueray. It's a treatise on mystical and ascetical theology, and it is my favorite book. And the reason why, I want, if you look at this book and try to read it, you cannot read this book without knowing without a doubt that the Holy Spirit just dictated that stuff to this man. This is like, brilliant, amazing, and you're like, wow, how did he bring this in? And I, as a writer, and what I do, and I know how hard it is, it's like you got to go to these places and then you got to bring it all back, and all this stuff. And it's like, how did he do this? This is a God-given book that was done by the Holy Spirit. There's no question that this was his task, and it is, it is a tool of transformation that, if someone wants to actually begin that process of cultivation, self-cultivation, wants to begin that examination, use the tools that have been provided. People can be very judgmental about, oh, but no, I don't like it because it's a Catholic book, or I don't like it because it's a Muslim book or whatever. And this is a book that God wrote. There's no freaking question in my mind, and of course, Father Tanqueray is not going to say that, but there's no question that this was an inspired man. And if you read it, you'll know what I'm saying. But the other part about this, which goes to what I was saying with taking these souls that went to these high immortal realms who did the cultivation, is when you do this type of study, energy follows course. And a lot of people do not get this part. It's really important. You want to have out-of-body experiences, then start doing these things. When you start engaging in this cultivation, you are literally setting in motion that energy, which is going to instigate the types of experiences that you are seeking, because that is how it works. That's the mechanism. Because out-of-body travel was never intended to be, let's go see what my neighbor's doing. It's intended to be this beautiful gift for the purification, discrimination, and discipline of the soul. And so when you start engaging in it, it comes of itself. Energy follows course. So don't forget, and don't take those things for granted. I'm going to cough. Maybe I should find the mute button here.
Don't. Because I know things can happen. That was a decent cough. You know what? You want some water? You muted it. Yeah, I knew.
And there I thought I had muted it for my cough.
Oh, you just muted it while you were talking.
I did. I did the wrong thing.
You turned it up for the cough.
But I'm going to go grab some water. But also, I just want to say, I got excited about that because people forget that. They don't realize, they want these techniques, and it's like, start reading this and you're going to have out-of-body experiences. It's like, be open to the way the mechanism really works, So hang on, let me go grab that water. I'll be right back.
You got it.
Talk amongst yourselves.
Talk amongst yourselves, everyone, because I've got nothing to say, really. So I'm just a host. So I hope everyone's enjoying this so far. We're going to jump into the alteration pathway and the rites into the medicine, rites of evolution, and the alteration of reality. So we actually recorded this whole podcast last week, and I didn't record it. So that happened. And it was like 2 hours and 20 minutes, and it was like, wow, I'm going to get like 40 vignettes from this. And I'm like, how come it's not converting? did I push this button? What do I do? And I'm like, oh no, it can't be. And my heart was like in my big toe. It was like, oh. But it happens, right?
It does happen. I just have to throw in another thought.
No way. You do?
Me, yeah.
Oh, well, okay.
You know, St. Padre Pio would say that spiritual reading was essential for the spiritual path. And this was part of the reason he did. Daily spiritual reading was essential for the spiritual path, is because people don't realize that that is part of how we keep that continual flow of the energy of the formation moving. And, you know, even in my own practice, if I get out of, you know, like out of the habit of doing the spiritual reading, and I'm not having the kinds of experiences I want to have, I know all I've got to do is pick out one of these, you know, books that I have and get back into my daily spiritual reading, and it's going to immediately renew the gift. And that's part of the reason I want to point this out. It's not a new concept. Many of the saints and the great spiritual teachers, not just Catholic, have said these things about how important it is that you are feeding your soul with that daily spiritual reading. And so I want to throw that out there. It's important for people to realize it's just as important as the prayer and meditation, because what we're doing is, you know, we talk about the prayer, talking to God, meditation, listening to God, but you know, the spiritual reading is allowing God to speak to us through one of his instruments, you know. And you know, we've had so many amazing instruments of God, you know, in the ancient sacred texts and all those writings that I'm always talking about, you know. and and every time we allow ourselves to partake from those, we are literally allowing God to speak to us in the way that he spoke through one of his beloved souls that he chose to speak through. And so we forget what an amazing gift that is to us, that we can actually partake of that. And, you know, it wasn't that long ago, you know, it was just pre-internet days when many of these texts were really hard to find. They were out of print. And, you know, now we have gotten so many of these things back into print and available for us to restore and create that tradition. And a lot of it's available for free online too, you know. And so take advantage of the work that God has already done in speaking to humanity through many of his souls that sat and listened to him, you know.
So these inspired writings to me is like an attunement.
Mm-hmm.
So like if you put a tuning fork and you go ding, you put it next to another one or 3 or 4 or 5, they all start vibrating at that same tone.
Yep.
So to me it's an attunement, it's a configuration of the
Yep.
soul as you're reading this, taking this in. It allows us to have a certain structure, I think, to bring in energies that maybe in a certain way that we wouldn't even have known how to do, like
Right.
a vibrational configuration for ourselves.
Yes. And you know, what's so cool about it, you know, another way to look at this, another angle, one of the things that I also think is fascinating is, you know, even just listening to the various near-death experiences that people have had, and people have put hundreds of them on the internet now, because every one of those experiences is offering us a different eye point view of God, you know. And it shows us something new about God that we didn't know before, you know. So all of those things are, in a sense, it's allowing us to tune into ways of seeing God that we couldn't have if we weren't open to listening to the way that he's spoken to others.
Mhm. Now, the second grand, oh, just had like a little burp, burp, burp. It happened again. So can you just say that last sentence that you said about how he's spoken to others? Because also the Wi-Fi went out for just a moment.
Oh,
So
okay.
it got jarred.
Yeah, it's a really important thing, because we're allowing ourselves to partake of how God has spoken to other souls. And it's different. We have different cultures, different religions, different corners of the world. And it's this is the way that we learn the many facets of God's presence, which is like a diamond. That's how we get to know God, by getting to know his friends.
Getting to know all the facets of the grand diamond.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Yep.
as for the grand phases of the soul, the discrimination process or the alteration pathway, have you ever heard of that?
Yes.
Okay. Can you give a brief synopsis before we go into the first phase of the rites of the medicine, or the rites into the medicine?
Yes, the alteration pathway deals a lot with how we learn to identify energetic truth, which is the God's truth behind the reality of what is going on behind the interaction or interplay that is going to occur in energy before it hits the ground. So, you can have the exact same circumstances, and it can have a completely different energetic truth based on intention or non-intention, ignorance or knowledge. It's all kinds of things, and we don't know that, because we don't know the heart of man. Only God knows the heart of an individual soul, and that is how it is revealed to us energetically and mystically, through the energetic truth. Now, the alteration pathway deals with this much bigger scheme of things, and it deals with the place I call the management realm, for lack of a better word, which is where things form in energy before they hit the ground. This is the realm where a lot of psychics will tune into when they are giving their readings, and that's why sometimes they will tune into things that have slightly different outcomes, because in the management realm, you have things forming, which are forming because of thoughts, words, deeds, actions, and stuff that is happening, but that can alter and change as those things change. Now, in the alteration pathway, we are learning how, when it is appropriate and according to God's will, that the angelic kingdom will send souls in to, to go in and alter the outcome of an event or events, so that someone will not have an outcome which would be detrimental to their soul purpose or what they are here to learn. And of course, this is, again, all based on the energetic truth as determined by God, not by us, not by the angels. And so, why or how God chooses when to intervene and when not to is all part of God's mystery, and we are just participants in it. But we learn that we can enter into the management realm, and we can actually change the energy. We can alter an event. We can move somebody out of the way, and we can change the outcome of an event as it hits the ground, so that either someone doesn't get killed, maybe they're still involved in an event, but they manage not to get killed. Someone gets an alteration in the way they're thinking, so they make a different choice. It can be any number of alterations. And then we also, as we're going through the alteration pathway, we're learning about altering those things within our own psyche, our own soul, which we learn as we are learning to do this on the grander scale. We learn about our own flaws in our own thinking, and how we can learn to alter those.
Okay. And so let's jump in with the first phase of the alteration pathway, the rites into the medicine.
The rites into the medicine begin with really cool things. In my case, I was very honored to be accompanied by Chief Joseph, who took me through this pathway. And so he came in. There were quite a few things that I was given to see about, the path of life, the path of death, and what happens when things go awry. And so we start out with, I'll give you a point that kind of defines the beginning of the rites of the medicine, because there's a whole bunch of things. The journey starts. Chief Joseph is meeting me nightly pretty much, and I'm sitting at the campfire right outside his teepee. And there's several nights where the other elders are chanting, and it's beautiful, and I'm being pulled into these things which are showing me either my own past lifetimes, um, uh, taking me into other things about good and evil, and then good and evil within myself, and all sorts of things. But there's one defining moment where it kind of tells you where Chief Joseph is going to take me. And so I'm allowed to watch from above a previous lifetime where I was um, I was in a Southern home during the Civil War, and I was not against slavery. And I was watching this, and I was like, what? Really confused by it, because I couldn't imagine that I would have ever had a lifetime where I might have had that kind of a view. And so I'm watching all this stuff, and I had a husband who was going off to fight for the Confederacy and all this stuff. And I'm like, I'm like freaking out. And then I'm like pulled back, and Chief Joseph is just calmly standing beside me, and he says, is it possible that if you had a lifetime where you once did not think there was anything wrong with slavery, that you might have some beliefs now that are not life-giving, that are not life-supporting? And I'm like, I guess so, and that's like, okay, launch. Okay, here we go. So that's where you begin, where you start examining the things within that have been yet unexamined. And so that's where the medicine begins. And you start with the the ancient chanters. You start seeing some of the medicine women, but it goes into much deeper as you go with the medicine women. But yes, this is where it begins. You start with a lot of different alterations. So you start working in the management realms. Chief Joseph is teaching me about this ball of light that he's given me to work with, that I have in my hands, and how I can utilize it in the management realm to change and move things around and alter the outcome of events. And I'm doing a lot of trial and error, and I'm making progress. And then we move into the next area.
That's great. And so moving from the rites into the medicine into the rites of evolution, what can we expect?
Well, that's when we move. Chief Joseph takes it into the next level. And this is where you start learning about how does evolution occur within a soul? And then how does that actually work on a larger scale in terms of like humanity or a people or whatever? And he starts out with this tobacco seed, and he talks about the different forms that the tobacco seed takes depending on when it's a seed, when it's in a pipe, when it's ash. And he has this beautiful analogy where he explains how literally how we go from this substance to this next place, and then literally to ash, which is, this is hard for people to relate to, I think, but when you go to the ash, it's when you're literally getting rid of the forms, the attachments, and you're starting to see things from a higher perspective. But there's more to it. It's a long journey. There's a lot more about good and evil. But again, in this path, in the discrimination pathway, you're dealing more with darkness and light, which is more of dominant darkness, ignorance, and light versus, real evil. You deal more with real evil as you go into discipline. And so the rites of evolution are going to take you more deeply into understanding how these subtle changes occur in a soul as they take these individual steps. And there's a lot of these individual meetings with Chief Joseph where he's teaching me around the campfire with a lot of his cute little allegories that I loved. And then also with him showing me stuff. He shows me a lot of things about myself, and he shows me a lot of things just about how darkness and light interact, and the eternal law. We begin to really deal with eternal law in the rites of evolution. And eternal law is, the higher law that the spirit world operates from, which has nothing to do with earthly law. It has to do with the eternal law, which goes back to what we were talking about earlier, like how Saint Michael can go take the demons out who are not given dominion by or permission by someone's thoughts, words, or deeds, but that eternal law prevents him from removing the others, not because he can't, it's because eternal law prevents it, because that is the dominion here, so you learn about these eternal laws and what are violations of eternal law, and how do you abide by eternal law when you are dealing with the alteration realms, because you are moving into an energy and a place where you must do only the will of God, nothing more, nothing less, or you risk being in violation of that. So there's a lot of that.
And finally, the third phase is the alteration of reality.
Yes, and that is, the final phase of it, where you are able to see these alterations in real action, where you're seeing how they hit the ground. And you go see things, this is where you're kind of on the cusp of when you're coming into the discipline pathway, where you're going to really deal with evil. And it was at the end of that alteration of reality path that I dealt with my first really evil situation. And I had to observe. Christ came and took me to take this soul to see the Council of 12, where the second death was pronounced upon him. And I was really freaked out by it. But Christ said to me, he repeated it twice. He said, "It is not for you to understand. It is just for you to know. It is not for you to understand. It is just for you to know." And he was trying to prepare me for the fact that God intervenes when we're dealing with ignorance, when we're dealing with unintentional acts that are based on different levels of, variations of ignorance or lower levels of intention. But when you get to true evil, there is justice. and so, it is a scary thing to look in the eyes of the all living God. But yes, that is what that's what you're learning there in the end is, okay, so now you're dealing with the lower level alterations, and you're learning how to do these alterations from the management realm. The management realm is, all of this stuff, which is third and fourth dimensional. The pathway of discrimination has to do with yourself on these levels. Excuse me. When you get to the discipline path, you're going to be hitting that multi-dimensional, where you're going to hit the purgatories and the hells. I'm going to see if I...
By the way, when you did this before, you went like this and coughed? Yeah. Oh, you muted me. Nice.
I'm trying to not cough at you, but I don't know if that's working.
When you went like that, I don't know, a few minutes ago and coughed, hey, it wasn't that bad.
Really?
Yeah, but when you go,
yeah, I have a new technique then.
Yeah.
Okay.
It looks kind of cool too, It'll be like a new thing people start doing, like it all came from you.
Yeah. So, when you're coming into from that discrimination thing, you are dealing, literally third and fourth realms, and you're dealing with these levels here. But literally, when you hit discipline, you're dealing with an infinite number of purgatories, an infinite number of hells, and it really gets vast then. So you're moving into a much wider entrance, and so it's quite the break there, because what you're learning in discrimination is, the lower level understanding of how to manipulate and understand and alter your more regular level, low level darkness, that's based on ignorance and not hugely intentional types of evil. And it's, it's this understanding your own things that are generally usually not intentional. A lot of times you're not even aware of them, and so if you become aware of them, that's a real important part of it. But then you're going to start hitting an even deeper examination that takes you in even deeper realms.
And with that, you're talking about the absolution pathway.
Absolutely, the absolution.
Well, let's get crazy. Let's get nuts, and let's just jump into it.
Okay.
Now, the 5 phases of the discipline process, we're going to start with ancient sacred paths.
Ancient sacred paths. Oh my gosh, that sounds so cool.
That does. It sounds very ancient and sacred, like a path. Sort of, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
All right, let's jump in.
Okay.
If you feel like it.
Sure, let's do it.
We're planning this for another podcast, but
why not? That's what you say. You say, why not? Let's dive.
Why not?
Let's dive. So, as we're diving, this, what happens is the beginning of this path can be pretty excruciatingly brutal in the sense of the types of things that you're put through, because you end up going into almost like the same type of awareness life review type thing you would at death. And so you're hit with this really profound awareness of your own sin. There is just a profound part of this in the beginning where you are weeping for your own sin, your own failings. You're seeing things that you did not see. You know, a big hallmark of this moment is the realization that, you know, that you could have ever judged anyone else, when now you realize your, you know, your own defects, and there's so much greater than you could have ever realized, and that you need so much mercy from God yourself, that you're like, I can't believe that I would ever deny mercy to anyone else. you know you know, and so there's this real humbling going on. I mean, a humbling and a rumbling, you know. I mean, you're talking about depth and tears and crying, and I mean really like getting it. You know, this is where you're really like seeing your defects and really weeping for your defects. This is where true contrition is really taking hold. You're getting it. You're getting whatever it is that you're being shown about yourself. And then you're going to start going into in the ancient sacred paths. You know, in my case, I was taken to see some monks who were deep underground, you know, who were doing some chanting to bring about these, you know, these things that were going to happen, which was starting to uh, prepare me for the journey to come, which was going to be pretty intense. I had some of my most powerful experiences in this ancient sacred paths period. You know, first of all, the Blessed Virgin Mother came to me, and she came with this, like these commando type people. They were like soldiers. And she said, it's time for you to learn about the darkness and evil. And I was like, you know, I remember it's like, but I don't want to. You know, I don't want to. It was like, no, you're just gonna do it. You know, it's you know, there's nothing. You don't have anything to say about it. You know, and so it's like, okay, so I'm beginning my training, and I'm like, okay, that's not what I was hoping for, not what I was expecting at all. You know, and then then you have. I went through these beautiful experiences that were also very intense. You know, it was, you know, it started with that whole life review type thing. And then after you have that humbling, you know, deep contrition thing, you know, I had this beautiful, intensely beautiful experience with the Buddha, where I was taken into wonderment, devotion, and humility, and I was taken into the energy of it. And so, you know, one of the things that happens in these out-of-body travel paths is that a lot of times, sometimes you're taken low, and then you are lifted up again once you have gotten the message of being taken low. So that, you know, so I was taken up again and taken into this unbelievable energy of wonderment, devotion, and humility. That, and the Buddha was there hovering with me, and it was just like, it was just so awesome. And this was when Jesus and the Buddha came to me as well and told me, retrieve the ancient sacred texts. So up until this point, I had not been studying the ancient sacred texts. This was when they told me to retrieve them. And I was like, what? Yeah. And then he said, and the ancient prayer books. And so I was given that instruction. And of course, I've been doing it ever since. It's been like 30 years, you know, just, you know, gathering it. Well, there's another one, you know, so, but, you know, so then you're like, okay, you're doing that. And so there's the preparation here is that you are going into these ancient sacred paths with the Buddha, with Christ. One of the things that I went through too was I was allowed to witness the formation of the Messiah, as, you know, so I was seeing Christ as he was, the rumbling as he was becoming the Messiah. It was just the birth point of, you know, of Christ. It wasn't the birth point of him as a baby. It was the birth point of that energy of what he was to do. And it was amazing, and so this entry into the ancient sacred paths began for me with Jesus and with the Buddha, but it would continue throughout the discipline pathway with many of these religious paths, which I share as I go through these other paths with, the Baha'i, Islam, the Urantia book, with Judaism, with Hinduism, and Jainism and Sikhism and all sorts of isms, and Zoroastrianism, of course, because I saw him later and that was awesome, and so so that's what that part was. And then it proceeds into that next phase, which is
is the entry. I was like totally entranced. And I was like, and mystery religions and indigenous teachings. And
very good. Thank you for remembering all those.
I got skills like that. Entry into the knowledge of the lower realms.
Yes. And so that's what then hits right there. And so when I was doing the commando training, I had to start learning how to hold in my light so that I could travel into hell realms, because I was going with the commandos, and they would teach me to do this, because if you show your light, you might just get literally gobbled up by because if they see that you're there and they realize that you're coming in from the light, they're going to come after you. So there's all these things that you have to do that to learn to enter into these realms, to be able to assist, but without being identified or spotted or getting into any trouble. And so you start with that training, and then you start learning about the different demons. And so I had this beautiful journey to the islands of the demons, where I was taken to see the demons of the common man. And these were demons of lust and rage, and I'm trying to remember what they all were, like the Lord demon, and the demons of pride, and there was what was that one called? There was another one, and it had to do with just belligerence against God kind of stuff, and lots of demons, So you learn about these demons of the common man, and then you start traveling into some of these hell realms, like Muddy Flats, which is for vanity and greed, and the good old Muddy Flats, and some of these other places. I think it was in this period that I actually went through my temptation with Satan himself. And that was pretty intense and pretty intense. And so, so that's what happens there as you enter into the lower realms.
And then self-scrutiny.
Self-scrutiny is, that's when, again, now you're heavy into the ancient sacred texts now. You're learning from all the prophets, saints, mystics, and the sages, not just from their writings, but also they are coming and they are teaching you. And so you are doing a very intrusive self-scrutiny of your own defects. And you're getting better at this in the sense that you don't take it so personally when you mess up. So you're becoming more capable of being taught, because now you're able to receive that criticism and actually become quicker at responding to it in a constructive way, rather than the intensity, which begins at the beginning. But that intensity is necessary at different points during the path, and definitely at the beginning, because we have to generate the original humility in order to really follow the path.
And original sin?
Original sin is when we really learn about the things that we pick up that come from all around us. And so it goes into the original sin of our families, the original sin of our own karmic pasts, the original sin of our societies, our communities, the original sin of our culture, our particular country, and how we delineate, and that we have to actually learn how to discern the difference between a cultural norm and something that could be then termed or discerned as original sin, something that would be going against life or against God. And so we then have to understand that original sin is not just the propensity to be able to commit sin, as in the fall of man. It is recognizing the elements that are affecting us. So again, a reminder, let's go back. It's the personal karmic thrusts that we bring into this life. Every family has their own dynamics and generates their own original sins and some of their own original virtues, so all those things apply. The communities that we live in, the countries that we live in, the society that we live in, and the people that we choose to associate with. And so all of these things, the secular world and what we choose, we have to learn how to discern what are the basic elements that are accepted as truth that might actually be false in God's eyes, that we need to take a closer look at and possibly alter in order to move further towards God and away from a habitual sin or vice that seems like just what everyone else is doing.
How is original sin at play right now in the world? In
Oh,
the biggest way possible.
well, right now, I mean, it's always at play because it's always at play. But, one of the biggest original sins that we are now seeing, and this is going to be my own personal, opinion of it, but I think that what's happened is that it has become acceptable to say that if you have an issue with anything in the world, it's okay to do any manner of evil to express that dissatisfaction. That evil for evil is good, and that is wrong. That would be something which goes against God's law. It goes against eternal law. It is destructive. It is not life-giving. And it is a false view that is fueling the utter destruction of our youth, of our future, of our country, and inevitably of a great part of our world. And, there is this, it started out with this idea of not wanting people to feel left out, maybe 20, 30 years ago. It was like a parenting philosophy, um, and everybody had to have equal certificates. Everybody had to, and in the previous generations, we all knew that some people were better at this and some people were better at that. And you won, you lost, things like this. But for some reason, there was this a value judgment change that everybody had to be treated equally all the time. And so we have this new idea that's come up that everybody has to be treated equally at all times, which means that so everybody has to be heard, even when people are behaving in a way that really does not justify that what they have to say has any value. And the way that they are doing it is committing felonies, and that's unacceptable. And that in a normal society, that would not be accepted, and it would not be allowed, and it would be prosecuted to the full extent of the law. And so there is this uh, this this accepting bad behavior and saying that because the quote intentions are good, that it's okay, but the intentions are not good. if there were good intentions, there would not be the destruction, there would not be the fighting, there would not be burning, there would not be any of these things. There would be something constructive being done, and that would show you that there was a good intention. Evil plus evil never equals good. It just doesn't. If God brings good from evil, that's God's doing. That's not what they're doing. So we have to take responsibility for choosing not, we should not allow, we should not allow that kind of stuff to be going on in society. There is absolutely no excuse for it. We are a country of law and order, and there's a reason why that has always been required and necessary in order for society to function.
Well, just as there's three major paths or grand phases of the soul, and then there's 8 phases in the ascension pathway, and 3 phases in the alteration pathway, and 5 phases in the absolution pathway. It seems like the earth right now is kind of going through some stages. So there was kind of an inhibition where things were, maybe just use our body as an analogy, where I was just keeping all this emotion in. And I wasn't allowed to express it. You know, just keep it in, or it's going to be really bad for everybody, or whatever. Okay, I'll just keep that in. And then all of a sudden, whoever was telling me to keep that emotion in suddenly had me direct my emotion toward a particular thing. And it was all this stuff, that all these emotions, let's say, that are just stuffed in me. And like, and then I was like, I'm expressing all this stuff. And I was directed to express it a certain way. And maybe it doesn't even have anything to do with the original thing that was.
No, it doesn't.
Yeah, but that's just another stage then. So that's stage 2. So the stage 1 was holding things in. Stage 2 was expressing it and having it pointed in a particular direction. And now there's going to be a third phase, right? There has to be something that comes after that. And so I think, there is going to be scrutiny around that. I think people are going to look at that, look at themselves, but hopefully, because we were talking also about how darkness can deceive us.
Oh, yeah.
Right. And so
there is a lot of deception going on right now.
And I think
that is expected in these times, because we are in that particular time, which begins now, began sooner, but the 2020 to 2035 period is a time of upheaval, and a lot of mystics have already been told that it's too late. It's too late to turn it back now. And
of course,
so
we don't believe that. Right? So what were you going to say?
Well, we're dealing with some apocalyptic type circumstances. And so how that plays out, I think we're all going to probably be witnesses to. But what I would say about it is we have a lot of people who are not taking responsibility for what they're doing, because they're not doing anything constructive. They don't even have a point to what they're doing. They're
what's next? So it could go in a bad way next, or maybe more fruitful.
Well, that would be great if it goes more fruitful, but what we've got to see is you cannot allow people who are violating the law to such a degree to continue to do so, no matter what their motivation. It's totally unacceptable. It's completely unacceptable.
And we've seen how that's played out.
Yes,
around the
and
world
there really is no explanation of what it is that they want, and the reason why is because they don't even know. And you said it best when you said the demonic could be affecting them. Of course it is. And the reality is, if there is malcontent or discontent among the masses, that discontent is coming from the fact that all of these things, all of the things that we are sent here to be doing in terms of the work of the soul has been completely neglected, and we are literally going backwards. And so what's happening is people are responding to the demonic to such a degree that they are like beheaded. They're running around with absolutely no clue as to what they're doing or why they're doing it, but they perfectly well believe that they have a purpose, and there is none except destruction. And the only people who are deceived are the ones who keep saying or believing or doing the destruction and saying there's purpose to it, because that is utter crap.
Yes.
That is a complete violation of eternal law.
So what are you hoping for the next phase?
In terms of what will happen here,
There's going to be
well,
another stage.
if I were going to hope for, I would hope that there would be a renewal and a coming back to God that would heal and renew the people and the earth. What we are hearing from legitimate prophetic voices is that that might not be where it's heading. We have to remember that we have been energizing that backwards flow for a very long time. And so we may have to deal with some of the consequences of some of these actions and mistakes that we've made in creating this beast, so to speak, of entitlement, of feeling the fact that people are feeling that they're entitled to engage in absolutely reprehensible behavior, and for some reason those who are in charge feeling like they're not entitled to stop them. That is absolutely backwards, and that is exactly what Satan wants, and that is exactly what he's getting. And I would like to make it really clear that anyone who is engaged in any of it, whether you're on the side of the people doing the destruction or the side of the people who's trying to just let them do it so you won't get blamed, you are all doing exactly what Satan wants you to do, because everything is backwards. It's stated in the Bible, when good is evil and evil is good. And that's what we are seeing. And that is what happens when the apocalyptic type events begin to occur. There's nothing different or nothing difficult to discern about what brings about a time like World War II, when you have a Holocaust or a genocide like Rwanda, or you have periods in history, which we have repeatedly, where horrific events come about. Kosovo. It starts with good becoming evil and evil becoming good, and law and order being thrown out the window, and people claiming that their destructive behavior is for a greater good. It's all a violation of eternal law, and it's all turning the world upside down, and it leads to more destruction, and it could lead to things of greater magnitude beyond anything that any of us have ever seen. And all those people who are involved in it, don't deceive yourselves for 1 minute. There is nothing of value or goodness involved in what you are doing. And don't think that God doesn't know it, because he does, and he sees it, and you are held accountable.
Now, before we get into the fifth phase of the absolution pathway, mysteries of the redemption, and kind of move towards a lighter note at the end, and it's been fantastic, this whole expression, and I honor that. I'm wondering, for the people, because there's, let's just keep this with the dark and the light, and let's keep
Okay.
this with evil and Satan and God and the angels. And so there is the devil fomenting this kind of behavior and energy on the earth. So the humans that are it's coming through. Like, and I mean like the people at the top, humans that are fomenting this, what's happening to their soul at the end of the day? Because they're hurting so many billions of souls. What's happening to these souls, these people?
Well, the people who are engaged in the destruction should realize that one of the eternal laws is the moment that you place another life in danger, you immediately rescind the right to your own. That's an eternal law. So, take this and spread it out over everything that you're doing. So every life that you violate, you immediately rescind, and take upon yourself that violation into your own. So literally, let me talk about a wonderful, beautiful experience I had. I was being facetious, where I went into where I went into
This is a different
the
side.
lower hell
This is a
realms.
different side of you. I've never
Yes,
seen
it
this
is a
side
different
before.
side, and
Wow.
sorry, but
No, I love it.
you got
That's
it.
great.
You got it. So
Hey,
there
we're
it
humans.
is.
We're humans. We
Yes.
have everything. Right? We're
Yes.
souls, eternal souls. Right.
Well, just to be real specific about these people, they are bringing that destruction upon their own soul. They will take it upon themselves. Every life that is destroyed because of their actions becomes a karmic injury to themselves, which they will pay until the end of time. That's the law. That's the law. It applies to all of us. So let me tell you about a wonderful journey I took a few years back, where I went to hell, and I went to a very special realm where the deceased dictators reside. So Saddam Hussein, Muammar Gaddafi, and Hitler, and some of these types are there. And they are in this horrible place, and they were very humbled, but they were allowed to come and talk to me. And Saddam Hussein in particular wanted to talk to me. And he is on his knees at my feet, grabbing my hand, saying, "You've got to help me. You've got to help me." And I said to him, "I don't know how to help you." I don't know how to, I mean, dude, you know, dude, come on. I mean, talk about karma. You know what I mean? And, and he's, so I'm talking to him about, you got to pay till the last farthing, guy. How many people did you murder? How many women did you have raped? How many people did you have destroyed in your own country? And you were given dominion over these people. You were given a responsibility that's given to you by God. And I said, "I don't know why you think I could help you." And he asked me to pray for him. And I said, "Well, I'm going to pray and ask God if it's okay to pray for you, because I don't really know if I can even do that. I don't know." And so here they are. And and I'm telling him, I said, "You're going to have to figure out, just like everyone else, how are you going to pay all that back? How are you going to pay it all back? Think about that." And I challenge everyone who's involved in all of this destruction right now, think about that. How many businesses have you destroyed? How many families who counted on those businesses have you destroyed? How many people's lives have been taken over this stupid crap? How many people have been injured? How many public buildings have been torched that you expect taxpayers to now find a way to replace? Because you will have to figure out how you're going to pay it back. And you may think, "Well, I don't have to pay for that." It's not going to happen that way, because the law of karma will require you to return and do whatever it takes until the bill is paid. And yes, we have a merciful God, And God will render mercy when mercy is truly and honestly sought after, but that doesn't mean that we're not accountable.
Well, when you watch a movie and there's a really good bad guy, usually they feel that what they're doing is the right thing. So they're doing it for a special reason. For instance, when I brought up earlier during the conversation about the guy who wanted to take away your forever before you cross the bridge, because that way he can get his daughter back. So there's maybe some people that are fomenting, and I mean the leaders of the devil, who he's guiding and orchestrating this through, maybe actually think that what they're doing is for the greater good, and they really believe that. And so what happens to them? How are they judged for their ignorance? Because it's not completely a
They will be taken into that energetic truth. Let's say any of them were, let's say they went through a life review now, and God forbid, I hope that none of them are, I hope that they will all remain safe, and that does not happen for any of them. They would be taken into the energetic truth of that. And it would be excruciatingly painful, because they would realize that whether they really believed that or not, they would see that they were really doing this for very self-serving motivations, that they really did not have an objective. Because if you have an objective that is good, you are going to seek the good. You are not going to be involved in destruction. You are going to be involved in creating something new. That is how light and dark work. This is part of what would happen. They would go through that process where they would see, I thought I was serving the light, but I was actually serving darkness, and they would feel the weight of that. Then they would have to realize, oh my goodness, now I have to really look at, well, why did I do that? Even though if I were honest with myself, I could have easily discerned that. Because we're responsible as well for the fact that we aren't doing any of the work that's required of us. How hard is it to literally sit down and say, is this going to be productive for any of the goals that I say that I'm actually seeking out? Is burning down a police building going to actually do anything for the soul of George Floyd? Or is it possible that we are actually putting fetters upon his soul because this is not something that he needs to carry? This is not what he, created. He already has enough to carry from the manner in which he died. And that was an event that has to do with the people who are being charged in his death. So all of these other high-level felonies are just more serious crimes that are being committed in the name of a man who was viciously killed. And that is dishonoring him. Because from everything that I have seen and heard, his family was an honorable family, and George Floyd was a God-fearing man. And to put that kind of dishonor is dishonorable to those who would do so. The actions of these people is dishonorable to every police officer and to every military person who has fought, served, been injured, or died for our freedom or for our protection. It is of such a disgusting nature and of such disrespect for the lives of men and women who have stood for greater ideals. It is a disgrace. It's a disgrace, And there is absolutely nothing of the light involved in it. There is no good message in it. There is nothing in it about justice and order and valuing other people's lives. They are destroying people's lives. They're destroying people's businesses. They're destroying police officers' lives. They're destroying people who are just there, who get injured's lives. They're destroying companies. After the biggest pandemic in over 100 years, which took over 40 million jobs, they have destroyed more jobs. This is such an obvious act of evil. Satan could not be laughing harder right now. And forgive me for being so serious about it, but it is such a flagrant act that it needs to be said. This is not something where you can sit on the fence and be lukewarm. You have to call evil for what it is. And I'm sure there are a lot of people out there, especially young people, who may be just following some kind of idea. They might be even just ignorant about this, and they're not giving it enough thought. And everybody needs to do the work of discernment. And they need to think about the fact that you do not get justice for one man who was unjustly killed by doing unjust things to more people. You don't do that. That is evil, no matter what you call it or how you put it in a nice little package with a bow. It doesn't change the nature of the act, the energetic truth, or what it is. And people have to recognize they have to do the work. And if people would step back and say, okay, what is my goal? What is it that I am upset about? And what can I do that will create something good and better? Create something. We need creative energy, not destructive energy. There's nothing in your destruction that is of value to anybody. Nothing. Nothing. And that would be my advice as a mystic and as a mother.
Now, all of that branched from the fourth phase of the discipline process, which was original sin.
Yeah.
So it's just interesting that that whole, I was going to say segue, but it wasn't a segue. That was a lot, because original sin is a really potent, heavy thing. So I'm sure when you were going through that, it was pretty intense.
Yeah.
And then moving into the mysteries of the redemption, and then we'll wrap up the absolution pathway, and then we'll just kind of do a quick synopsis of the absolution pathway and the whole 3 grand phases.
Sure.
So let's start with mysteries of the redemption, the 5th and final phase of the absolution pathway. Can you jump into that?
Sure. What is it? Remind me.
It's the mysteries of the redemption.
Oh.
So I said it a couple of times, and both times you're like, mm-hmm. I was like, cause I can tell too, you're still like, a lot of adrenaline, but yeah, which is great. I love it.
Yeah.
We all need to express ourselves like that. It's fantastic.
Well,
and I thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome. So in the Mysteries of the Redemption phase, that's when I was taken into the Mysteries of the Redemption. And I had these 2 grand visions during this period. And there were a lot of other things as well. But I was taken into, literally, this is when I was told the book was going to be called The Mysteries of the Redemption. I was taken into this energetic panoply and literally saw how the mysteries of the redemption played out before me. And it was something that is so hard to put in words. It was just so beautiful. And during this period as well, I was also shown how in the New Testament, how the mysteries of the redemption and the book, the one I just, we're talking about, showed and demonstrated what was taught in the Gospels of how the mystery of the redemption played itself out. And that is how the mystery of the redemption plays itself out in the soul, because we are here to be redeemed. And what does it mean to be redeemed? It means that we have to literally, what does redeem mean? We have to hand ourselves back over to God and let ourselves be reseated back. And this redemption process means that we become a new creation. And in this mysteries of the redemption, I was taken into a bunch of things. I was taken into the Last Supper, and I was taken into the crucifixion, and I was taken into the islands, these islands of really cool stuff. But there was all this, it's all about how, I'm trying to remember the words that were in the sky when I was seeing the mysteries of mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. And what was the other words? It's from songs. These are songs that are old songs, and they were emblazoned in the sky. And Jesus appeared, the clouds opened, and they were emblazoned in the sky, and there were the angelic hosts, and this energy that was forming that showed how the redemption occurs energetically. Knowledge is vibration, not information. It occurs through vibration. And we have to remember too, even in looking at my reaction to what I just shared with you, when you are going through this discipline pathway, you are going to be experiencing this different side of God, which is justice. You're going into the hell realms. You're dealing with the demonic, spiritual warfare. And this is where you draw the line. This is where God draws the line and takes you in and has you take out demons. And you have to destroy them, dismantle them, and send them back to hell. And you become very different in that you learn that evil is not to be tolerated. It is not to be tolerated, because evil is not a force that can be contained. It has to be stopped. That's just the nature of it. And so you're dealing with a whole different kind of energy in the discipline pathway. But when you are learning about how this redemption occurs, you have to understand it from the energetic sense and from the sense of how it works inside of you, and how then you become this instrument of the redemption as well. And you will be taken through these initiations through the life of Christ during this time as well, because these are all important moments in redemption history, and how these moments are transformative to us individually. There's an energetic element that we are taking on when we go there. But when I had the experience about the mysteries of the redemption, it was, there are experiences that I've had in my life. And I've had thousands of out-of-body experiences. But there are certain experiences that I've had in my life that stand out, that were above and beyond. I mean, they are like the Ezekiel visions, these are the times that were where the heavens were opened, and it was like where you came, when you came back, you were like, and you were, it was a completely different space, different level of intensity. This was one of them. And there's only a few of those in my life. It would include the time when I was 9 years old, when it all began. It would include the mysteries of the redemption vision. It would include the vision that I had when I was taken into the throne room of God, which I believe I wrote about in, I think it was the Christ of the Redemption, but it might have been the Limb of the Redemption. I'm not sure. But these are, those are three. Oh, and then there was when in the Potentate, when I was given to enter into this, and it was in this cave where I was entering into the body of Mary and was allowed to float and fly and merge throughout this cave, and she was taking with me to, as she was spreading her light. I can't explain it, but it was in the Potentate. But there were just a few things that I had of all those thousands of experiences that were above and beyond. There was one moment when it was in the Mystical Captive series, when I had walked across the cloudy realm, and up ahead was the throne of Christ. He turned and looked at me, the crown on his head, and that was when I knew that he was accepting me, and taking me in. And it was a beautiful moment. There are certain moments, and there's only a few, handfuls. The mysteries of the redemption vision was among them, where literally it was the heavens opened, the angels were singing, Christ was in the sky, mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. And it's something I'll never be able to fully describe. There were, in this experience was when I was also shown the hierarchies of the angels. And I was actually shown in that particular vision that the Urantia book is the one that really captures the hierarchies of the angels the closest as to how it really is in the heavenlies. And that's the first section of the Urantia book, and it really goes into great detail on the heavenly hosts. And there are, it's hard to put into words, so I
Well,
apologize.
no, you're doing great. You're doing great. In the mysteries of the redemption, at the end of the book, there was a gala celebration of the process and journey of your soul. And so, what exactly were they celebrating?
Well, they were celebrating the redemption,
And what does that mean?
Well, the redemption is everything. It's everything. It's what we come here to do, to be redeemed. It's to overcome our sinful nature, to overturn our karmic past, and to embrace the light of God and walk forward into our future in the light. And that's what we come here to do. And, if you'll remember too, there was a scene in the discrimination pathway with Chief Joseph, where he's talking about, well, this is what you've done. And I'm like, but I haven't done enough. I haven't done enough. And he said, but it was like he was pointing out, but there's so few who have done what you've done. And that it was like it was greatly appreciated that I did it. And I was still thinking, it's not enough. It's still not enough. I've got to keep going, and we don't realize, even along the way, even going back to the initiations, I was before the Council of 12, and it was the Easter Island stones, and they were talking to me. And, they asked me, I was being asked questions about what I had achieved as to, to go to the next initiation. And I said, well, I don't make very much money, but I've done a lot of spiritual stuff. And they were laughing about the money thing, because they said that's not the type of attainment that we seek. And so they were laughing about it, because our worldly value is, gosh, I don't make very much money, but they were happy with the real resume that I had, which was that I was seeking these spiritual things, but I had this low self-esteem because I, never made much money. I was just always doing, but all along the way, you see this common thread, which is the seeking that you're doing. What is of value is that soul journey. It's the redemption, it's the cultivation, it's the purification, it's the work that goes into actually overcoming this this sinful nature, the karmic thrust, and going into a higher expression of ourselves, which we cannot become if we do not do these things. We have to do these things in order to attain to that. And so the celebration is when a soul achieves that, there's great happiness about it. And there was a lot of celebrations that they would do for different steps along the way, which was really neat. I remember they did they got all excited about when I finished The Voice of the Prophets, which was that encyclopedia of ancient sacred texts. It was a big deal, and I was surprised, because I was like, really? Okay, I didn't realize that was a big deal. Okay, cool. All right.
That's a huge work.
Yeah.
To compile all of that is incredible. Good work.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you.
It's time for a gala celebration.
Yeah.
So those are the three grand phases of the soul. And I thank you for being on this call with me, doing it again. We went further, though. This time we got into the discipline pathway, and
we did.
We talked about some other stuff, and so it was fantastic. So we'll have to come up with something extra cool for our next podcast.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sure we can do that.
Neato.
Yeah. Well, thanks again for your time, Marilynn.
Thank you, Brian.
Until next time.